His eyes widened as he saw the impossible. Bobby had drawn her father close, and with tender care, she fed him from her breast. Duchef and his little daughter Bobby lived in a small sunlit house nestled on the edge of Zuko's busiest market, where sounds of chatter and laughter floated in like music. The walls, bathed in golden sunlight each morning, seemed to carry the warmth of love they shared, making up for their modest means. Life was modest, but sweet. Bobby's laughter filled their home, a daily reminder that he was honoring his wife's last wish through his endless sacrifices. He could still hear her faint, fading voice, soft as a whisper in a breeze. Promise me that you would love and protect our daughter, even at the cost of your own life. These words echoed within him, a vow carved deep into his soul. Every day, he honored that promise with quiet dedication. Even when the toil of bricklaying left his hands rough as tree bark and his body weary, he remained a humble bricklayer with weathered hands and an unwavering heart. Duchef was a man of few possessions but boundless love, especially for his only child, Bobby. With his humble weathered hands, he crafted homes for others, pouring all the love he could no longer give Asa into the life he built for their daughter. Though the world had taken much from him, it could not strip him of the fierce, unwavering devotion he held for Bobby, the living memory of the woman he loved and the most precious piece of his heart. Remarrying was never on Duchef's heart. He already had all the happiness he could ask for. Moreover, he couldn't risk hurting his daughter in the name of a stepmom. Friends and neighbors praised Duchef's skills and resilience, but they knew he was struggling, his wages barely covering their needs. But Duchef kept going, laying bricks upon bricks, creating structures for the wealthy from dawn till dusk. Duchef's life was hard, but he took pride in his work. And though they often struggled, his friend Chief Danpulu was someone he looked up to as a pillar of support. Chief Danpulu was such a rich man, known for his philanthropic activities in Zuko and beyond. He helped the poor, provided food for the needy, and even built houses for widows. Chief Danpulu was more than just a friend to Duchef. He was a figure of power who could extend a helping hand whenever people asked for help. But happiness has a way of slipping through even the tightest grips, like grains of sand trickling between one's fingers. Now one evening, Bobby's laughter faded, replaced by a resilient silence that hung heavy in their small home. She lay still, her once bright eyes dimming like a candle, struggling against the wind. Her sickness crept in quietly, but soon took root, gripping her with an unrelenting force, draining her strength and robbing her of the light that used to dance in her gaze. Papa, I feel very sick. All over my body aches, and I can't even move. At first, Duchef clung to hope, brushing off her weakness as a passing ailment. But as days turned into weeks, dread settled into his bones. Colder than the winter's touch, he watched her Bobby slip further from him, powerless to stop her slow decline. I'm sorry to put you through all this stress, Papa. I couldn't get up to use the toilet, and I did not know when I pulled on myself, Bobby said with shame written all over her face. Don't worry, my sunshine. I'll clean you up. Daddy is always here for you, Duchef said with a heart trembling. He tried to be brave, but he couldn't continue fighting back the tears, seeing his lovely daughter bedridden to the point of soiling herself was a devastating shock he couldn't recover from. When the chef finally called for the village healer, the man approached with gentle hands and grave eyes. After a long, silent examination, he looked at the chef, his face clouded with worry. "The chef," he began, his voice almost a whisper. "This sickness is beyond what I can handle. Abobi needs an expert physician, someone with medicine and skill far beyond my own. But the cost will be high, more than most could ever hope to pay." The healer's words shattered the chef, leaving him with a hollow ache. His savings were little, barely enough to keep food on their table, let alone secure the fortune that Abobi's treatment demanded. Yet, love fueled his desperation, driving him to sacrifice everything he held dear. He sold their small sunlit home and moved to a shack. Even the precious keepsakes of Asa, his wife, the last tangible piece of her legacy, were not spared. One by one, each piece of their lives was surrendered in a desperate attempt to save his daughter. But still, it was not enough. The gulf between him and the cure she needed loomed wide and unyielding, a reminder of how little he had in the face of this merciless fate. One evening, with worry tightening around his heart, the chef approached Chief Danpulo's grand home. Its carved golden doors and opulent surroundings, a stark contrast to the humble life he knew. The chef's voice wavered as he spoke, laying bare the desperation that clung to him. Chief Danpulo listened in silence, his gaze unwavering and face impassive. "I desperately need your help, sir. My only daughter Abobi is terribly ill at the point of death, and the physician is demanding a price costlier than an arm and a leg. This child is my world. I will not survive a day if I lose her. Please loan me 1,000 kefas to offset the bills and save my child." The air grew thick as the chef finished, his last words echoing in the chief's grand paw, like a plea to a higher power. Finally, Danpulo leaned forward, his fingers stippled thoughtfully. "I will help you save your precious daughter," he said at last, his voice low and deliberate. "But there is one condition." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth as he continued. "I will loan you the full amount, but you must repay this sum in precisely 1 year." The words hung heavily in the air, a pact waiting to be sealed. Fear swirled within the chef, clouding his thoughts until he could see only Abobi's face, pale and fragile. Chief Danpulo's condition barely registered. How could he refuse? He nodded fervently. Yes, I'll do as you say, sir," his eyes shining with gratitude and desperation alike. Abobi was his world, the only light left in the vast darkness, and no price was too high to save her. With a shaky promise, the chef accepted the bag of money, its weight pressing down on him as he left the chief's house that night, heavy with both hope and dread, as he set out to save the life that meant the world to him. The chef got to the physician's place where his daughter's ailing, unconscious body laid, and handed over the money he loaned. "Here is the money, sir. Please do everything possible to save my daughter. Please, I beg of you." Months crept by, each day a small victory as Abobi's strength returned, like spring after a harsh winter. Ducheff's heart swelled with hope as color flushed back into Abobi's cheeks. Her laughter, once more a bright ribbon, weaving through their modest home. Every glimpse of her renewed joy stirred the ache in his soul, a reminder of the sacrifice he had made to bring her back to life. But even as her health flourished, the weight of his promise to Chief Danpulu cast a dark shadow over his happiness. The debt was a mountain he couldn't climb, no matter how he toiled. Days blurred into night as the chef picked up extra jobs, pushing his body to the edge. Yet, the money gathered like droplets in a dry riverbed. When the year finally dwindled to its last day, dread pulled in his chest like cold lead. With trembling resolve, the chef returned to Chief Dampulu's mansion, his voice thick with desperation. "My friend," he pleaded, bowing his head in humility, "I am grateful for your assistance in saving the life of my daughter. However, I have done everything possible to save up your money in full. Yet, I could only gather a small portion of the money. Right now, I have nothing left but my labor. Please let me walk off this debt on your new site. I will build for you, lay bricks, whatever you need. Please, my friend." Dampulu's gaze hardened, the warmth of friendship replaced by something sharp and unyielding. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Chief Dampulu spoke, his voice edged with ice. "Duchef," he said slowly, "there is one other way to erase this debt completely." Duchef's face lit up like a lamp. "What is it, my friend? Whatever it is, I am willing to do to repay this debt. I will forgive you your loan entirely if you agree to a marriage between your daughter Abobi and me," Chief Danpulu replied. Duchef froze, his heart recoiling with a pain that cut deeper than any debt. The thought of his little daughter Abobi, innocent and barely grown, wed to this man he once trusted, filled him with horror. He thought of Asa's last wish, her dying plea that he would love and protect their daughter. How could he ever honor that promise if he gave Abobi away like a token to pay his debt? Shame clung to him like a heavy cloak, yet he was concerned. Each path led back to Dampulu's cold demand. With a heart crushed by despair, Duchef finally whispered in agreement, the words tasting like ash on his tongue, but he could not bring himself to tell Abobi of her fate. The guilt gnawed at him, filling his days with shame and his nights with sleepless grief. His life became a silent torment, his sorrow too deep for words, as he waited in helpless agony, borne by his choice and haunted by his vow. One cold, stormy night, the rain fell in torrents, hammering against the roof like the drums of Duchef's pounding heart. He could no longer bear the weight pressing down on him, his resolve cracking beneath the relentless pull of his daughter's innocence slipping away. In the flickering glow of a single oil lamp, Duchef sat with quivering hands, pouring his soul onto a letter. The words spilled out like a confession, each stroke of his pen filled with the sorrow, love, and desperation that had plagued him for months. In his letter he spoke of Asa, his late wife, the promise he had made, the dreams they once shared for Abobi, and the sacrifices he had made since her death. His words painted the picture of a man struggling against an unforgiving fate, of a father who had given everything to honor his wife's wish and keep their daughter's laughter alive. He wrote of how the debts and the cruel condition that came with it had poisoned their happiness and threatened to chain their daughter's future to Dampulu's way. With a trembling hand, He pleaded for mercy, asking Chief Dampulu to forgive the remainder of the debt. Enclosed within the letter was every last coin the chef had managed to save, half of the borrowed sum, a testament to his endless labor. As the rain continued its mournful drumming, the chef placed the letter and money at the gate of Chief Danpulu's estate. With a final glance at the life he was leaving behind, he turned and hurried back to gather Abobi. Wrapping her up in a thick shawl to protect her from the storm, he packed a few belongings, the essentials they would need for a journey into the unknown. Together, father and daughter slipped into the night, leaving Zuko and its burdens behind. They traveled under the cover of darkness, each step carrying them further from Dampulu's reach. Rain soaked their clothes and chilled their skin, but the chef held Abobi close, finding strength in her warmth. Finally, after many miles, they reached the quiet village, a sanctuary far beyond Zuko's border, where Dampulu's shadow could not follow. Papa, I love our new home. Although I miss my friend back at Zuko, I'm happy at the change of countenance and happiness we have experienced since we got here, Abobi said. Don't worry, my daughter. Some things you'll never understand until you're of age. So in that distant village, the chef found solace, free at last from the chains of his debt, and determined to carve out a new life for Abobi, one where her laughter could once again fill their home, unburdened by the weight of an unpaid loan. Years flowed by like a gentle river, and in the shelter of their new life, Abobi blossomed. She became a beautiful, vibrant young woman, her spirit confident and unbroken. Each day, the chef watched her grow, her laughter echoing in their modest home, her eyes bright with dreams of her own. Pride and joy swelled into Chef's heart. He has fulfilled his promise to Asa, protecting their daughter and guiding her into a life of happiness and strength. One day, Abobi came to her father, her eyes shy yet glowing with excitement. Papa, she began, a soft smile playing on her lips. My heart has found joy with my friend Apu. He is kind, patient, and he wants to make a life with me. Her voice was filled with hope, but the chef felt a pang in his chest, a bittersweet ache he had not anticipated. Though he had always known this day would come, he felt as though his little girl was slipping through his fingers, just as she had once slipped away into illness years before. Seeing her father's face fall, Abobi's expression softened. She reached for his hands, her touch reassuring. Papa, she said gently, I know how dear I am to you. I've watched you sacrifice so much, laying down your own life to see me smile. That's a love I can never trade for anything. You will always be a part of my life, Papa, my only family yet on earth. The chef's heart swelled, and the sorrow in his eyes melted, replaced by pride. He knew her words were true. Even as she set out to build her own family, the bond they shared was unbreakable, woven from years of love and sacrifice. In a short time, Abobi and Apu married, their home alive with joy and laughter, where the chef found his own happiness nestled among them. He continued to work, carving a niche for himself in the town, as a diligent bricklayer who never retired, a man who carried the weight of his past with quiet dignity. The townspeople came to know him not just for his skill, but for his spirit, a father whose heart was as solid as the walls he built, and whose legacy was the family he had fought so hard to protect. In the warmth of his daughter's home, the chef's days were filled with quiet fulfillment. His journey now complete, his promise kept. As time strolled by, Abobi gave birth to a bright-eyed son. The boy was a spark that lifted the chef's weary heart. and for the first time in years, peace settled over him like a warm blanket. Each time he looked at her Bobby, gently breastfeeding his grandchild, happy and cherished by her husband, he felt his vow to Asa was fulfilled. With his grandson cradled in his arms, the chef allowed himself a fragile hope. Perhaps they had finally escaped the shadow of the past, and even Chief Dampulu had long forgotten them. But fate has a way of rekindling settled ashes. So one cold morning, a sharp knock rattled their door, shattering the stillness. Before they could gather themselves, guards flooded into their home, surrounding the chef. Without explanation, they seized him, binding his hands and accusing him of stealing a goat. A crime, as absurd as it was false. Abobi's eyes widened in shock as she struggled to comprehend the scene unfolding before her. Her father, a man who had sacrificed everything and walked the path of unwavering integrity, dragged through the streets like a common criminal. She ran mad behind them, crying and begging them to release her father. The chef's innocent voice rang out, desperate and raw, as he protested his innocence, but the guard's face remained stone-hard, deaf to his pleas. "I am innocent," he cried, his voice hoarse with desperation. "I would never do such a thing, not even in the dearest of times." His hands shook, bound tightly by chains that bit into his wrists. As he was paraded through the village, his spirit crushed under the weight of unjust shame. With tears streaming down his face, he muttered bitterly, "I thought the universe had finally smiled on me. I thought my trials were over, but once again misfortune has found me. How can life be so unfair?" His voice trembled, echoing through the streets, but the world turned a blind eye. Abobi watched, her heart shattering, as her father, her beloved steadfast papa, was pulled from the life he had fought so hard to build, their once peaceful world, thrown into a chaos once more. Eventually, the chef was extradited to Zuku to serve his term, since he was not a native of Gado. His arrival shook the village of Zuku. The once missing bricklayer had suddenly resurfaced, but this time in chains. It was a sad tale to many. Now, the law of Zuko was clear. Anyone caught stealing was sentenced to death by starvation. And so, on arrival, the chef was thrown into the cold damp cell of the village dungeon, condemned to waste away. No food or water was given to him, and he was expected to die in a matter of days. When Abobi heard that her father was sent back to their hometown of Zuku, disbelief and fear washed over her. She knew without a doubt that he was innocent, and she would not let him face this injustice alone. Without delay, she gathered her belongings and made the long journey back to Zuku. The feeling of nostalgia gripped her as she sighted her former hometown where she started life as a child. She could vividly remember the fateful cold night her father smuggled her out of the village. Amidst her thoughts, she was determined to find a way to help her father. Early the following day, Abobi went before the king, her voice filled with raw emotions as she pleaded, "I am my father's only child. Please grant me permission to see him in what may be his final days on earth." Moved by her words, the king consented, but imposed a strict rule. "You are forbidden from bringing your father any food or water. If you are caught with any form of food or edible substance, you will be locked up too, and your punishment will be merciless." Abobi thanked the king, promising to do just as he said, and she went on her way. Each morning, Abobi arrived at the prison, her heart pounding as she walked towards the guards. The guards searched her thoroughly, inspecting her clothes and belongings to ensure she carried nothing that is edible. Yet, with each visit, the chef's strength seemed unshakable. Despite his confinement, his body showed no sign of weakness, and every day he looked into Abobi's eyes, he drew hope and life from her presence alone. As the days turned into weeks, the chief guard grew increasingly suspicious. How could a man of this age endure so long without food or water? This is outrightly impossible. It had never happened before. The chief guard began to watch the chef closely, wondering what was his secret and what sustained him so far. Driven by his curiosity, the guard confronted the chef, but each time the chef remained silent, his only response a steady gaze that revealed nothing. Early one morning, determined to discover the truth, the guard decided to hide in a shadow corner near the cell as Abobi arrived. As usual, the guard inspected her thoroughly and finding nothing, allowed her to enter. Abobi went in, her eyes soft and filled with love. As she leaned close to the bars, the guard watched, barely daring to breathe. His eyes widened as he saw the impossible. Abobi had drawn her father close, and with tender care, she fed him from her breast. The chef drank quietly, each sip a gift that sustained his spirit and his body alike. The guard's heart pounded in shock at the sight, yet he could not look away. Here in the darkened cell, he witnessed a woman's determination, so fierce that it defied the king's cruel rules. Abobi had found a way to nourish her father, defying the guard's vigilance, sustaining him not just with milk, but with the strength of her devotion. The guard was petrified at the sight of a lady breastfeeding her own father. No wonder they hardly spoke during her visit. This was the most bizarre sight he had ever witnessed his entire life. He quickly burst into the cell, seized Abobi, and dragged her to the king's court alongside her father. The news of the strange acts diffused throughout Zuko, and the villagers gathered to witness the trial and verdict for such an abominable act. They had never heard of such a thing before, that a man would suck from the breasts of his own daughter. By the time Abobi and her father reached the village square, a crowd of villagers had gathered, buzzing with whispers and stunned expressions. This was an abomination, a shocking spectacle the village had never witnessed. Their eyes were filled with equal parts of horror and fascination. In the grand shadowed village square, the king's gaze was unyielding as he addressed Abobi. His voice echoed in the chambers, silencing the murmurs. "Now tell the court," he determined, "why you defied my order and kept your father alive in such an abominable way." Abobi took a trembling breath, fighting to steady her voice as she stepped forward. She shared her story, her words, weaving a portrait of her fight from Zuko and the sacrifices her father had made to protect her. She explained that her father, a man of integrity and honor, had been wrongly accused, and she could not bear to let him die a painful death for a crime he had not committed. Her voice broke as she added, "I did what I did to preserve my father's life, because I know he would have given his life to see me live, even just for a day longer." As Abobi spoke, the villagers looked on, many moved to silent tears by the depth of her love and the sacrifices the chef had made for her. Yet, the king remained unmoved, his eyes cold. "The law must take its full course," he declared, his tone final. With a wave of his hand, he sentenced the chef to death by hanging immediately. A wail tore through Abobi as she fell to her knees, her body racked with sobs that echoed through the silent court. Her father, her only family, her beloved protector, was to be taken from her in the most brutal of ways. Before the entire village, her cries filled the village square, a raw, desperate plea against the cruelty of fate. But the king's gaze was as hard as stone, and the sentence remained. "If anyone has anything to say about this ruling, let them speak now or forever remain silent," the king thundered, his hand poised to strike the final blow of judgment. A stillness hung heavy in the air. The courtroom was as silent as a graveyard. Just as the king's hand was about to descend, a distant voice broke the silence. A desperate, urgent cry from the back of the crowd. Abobi's husband burst into the courtroom, a young man at his side. Breathless and wide-eyed, he pushed through the villagers and managed to catch his breath. "Please don't kill him, he is innocent," he cried, his voice thick with urgency. All eyes turned to him, the weight of the anticipation palpable. The young man beside him looked so guilty. His head hung low, barely meeting the gaze of those around him. Abobi's husband continued, "This man here, he's the one that accused my father-in-law of stealing his goats. But after weeks of pleading and questioning, he confessed that he had been paid. A very wealthy man from Zuko had bribed him to make the accusation." The crowd gasped, faces twisted with shock and confusion. Who would want to frame the humble Duchef? And to what end? As the murmurs died down, the king fixed a sharp gaze at the young man, demanding, "Name the person who paid you to commit this grievous wrong." The man swallowed, glanced nervously around the courtroom before lifting his hand to point, straight at Chief Danpulu. A stunned silence fell, and the village square erupted in disbelief. The air was thick with whispers and cries of astonishment. Chief Danpulu, once regarded as Duchef's close friend, stood exposed as the architect of the twist scheme. Guards immediately seized him as he attempted to slip away, dragging him back to the king's court. Pressed for the truth, Danpulu finally broke. Bitter with resentment, he admitted that he had never forgiven Duchef for escaping the debt, and harbored a grudge over Duchef's refusal to give Abobi to him as a payment.